There we go. Can we go? All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good evening, and good afternoon, and good morning to viewers, listeners from all over the world. Um, I'm Shabuddin Romani. I'm from the Academia Al Ikhlas Academia Library, and we're based in Cape Town in beautiful South Africa. It's a cold Cape Town today, but that's winter for us, and we enjoy the cold. It brings us water, alhamdulillah, and inshallah, we'll survive the cold and wait for another beautiful summer, not too far from now. So Al Ikhlas Academia Library in Cape Town is uh, an organization that has, over a long period of time, organized many seminars and now obviously webinars to highlight pertinent issues that affects both this and the global community. Today's seminar, the topic is Black Lives, and we've emphasized do matter. So it's Black Lives Do Matter, addressing the global pandemic of racism. It's a sickness that we find globally at various points, and obviously with the murder of George Floyd in the United States, it's again once again highlighted the issue of racism and its impact on different communities. So Al Ikhlas Academy Library in Cape Town, we're doing this particular broadcast or webinar, as we now know them to be, with the World for All Foundation, which is founded by Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool, and we welcome, therefore, viewers and listeners from New York to Jakarta to India, from Kuwait to the UAE, and I believe we might even have viewers and also listeners in Saudi Arabia, and then also we know that we have viewers and listeners in West Africa and also in East Africa. This is a wonderful occasion to discuss this very, very pertinent topic of Black Lives Do Matter. We're going to try and address the global pandemic of racism. This webinar, as I said, is part of a series. We hope that as a result, we would be able to kind of unpack the issues and find some solutions going forward. The topic is very relevant. The almost global campaign of death, destruction, and dispossession of people of non European descent, a human race who, for centuries, believe it or not, has been traded, annihilated in some instances, and exploited, and now almost systematically targeted for killing by those who claim to have superpower status. This is the backdrop to the Black Lives Do Matter global campaign. It is this pivotal point around which attitudes and actions need to be changed by force, in my opinion, my personal opinion, as it is, if necessary, and which is what we've seen in the United States in particular, and the kind of response that we've had, globally speaking, about people who are feeling quite aggrieved at the way in which people are being dealt with. So today's speakers are Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool, who served as a very active anti-apartheid campaigner, was often jailed for his efforts, and after 1994 in South Africa, was the Premier of the Western Cape as a member of the African National Congress, and before being posted after his term as Premier to the United States as South Africa's ambassador, where he spent almost 5 years, which is the full term. His global view of the acute disparities between people and nations led him to form the World for All Foundations that campaigns aggressively for addressing the developmental challenges that's faced by millions of people across the board. Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool, welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
The other speaker we have, we're really pleased to have, in fact, is Shaykh Siraaj Wahhaj, a committed believer who embraced Islam in the 1970s and now carries the extremely heavy mantle, I must say, and responsibilities of being one of the world's key Muslim figures. Sheikh Siraaj, or Imam Siraaj, as he's lovingly known, was vice chair at one point of the Islamic Society of North America and is currently the Imam at the Masjid Taqwah, I understand, in Brooklyn, in New York. Sheikh Siraj, or Imam Siraj, Wahhaj, welcome to you.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you for offering your insight, Imam, and we hope we would come to some kind of conclusion as a way forward. So the program for today is very simple. This is actually not a debate. We're not casting any aspersions against anybody. It's purely the function of this webinar is to look at the issues and find the middle road going forward. So Ambassador Rasool will introduce his views in terms of the program for today for a maximum of 10 minutes. And then this will be followed by a 10-minute introduction by Sheikh Siraj. Thereafter, we'll look at the current state of affairs in the United States with a campaign to ensure that George Floyd's murder by a predominantly white police force is not left unchallenged. Thereafter, we will take Q&As for about 20 minutes. So viewers and listeners are encouraged to use the social media platform. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, to pop questions to us, and those of us who are in South Africa to also pop us questions. And I'm also pleased, and I have neglected to mention this, that we're very pleased to also have ITV, the national, in fact, a continental TV station that's based in Johannesburg in South Africa. We're broadcasting live on ITV, and we're also broadcasting live on the Voice of the Cape, lovingly known as VOC FM, which is a Cape Town-based Islamic or Muslim radio station. We're broadcasting live on those two platforms too, in addition to Facebook and also YouTube, and obviously other social media platforms. So this is the background. I'm going to ask Ambassador Rasool to give us his take on what's going on in the United States. I give you 10 minutes, Ambassador Rasool, please.
Jazakumullah khair. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Shabuddin, Imam Siraj, our viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening.
Wa alaikum salam.
Good afternoon in America. Good morning in the East, or wherever you are. I think that it is for me and the World for All Foundation a distinct honor to be partnering with Al-Ikhlas Academia, Library and Resources Center. We were there in those early days of Ramadan when they had those seminars in the Athlone Civic Center during the apartheid years. We have had big walks during the time of liberation to raise money for books. We have had literacy projects that we've done together. And today they have a state-of-the-art library and resources center, but remain absolutely rooted in community. So it is wonderful for Shabuddin to represent that strain. Imam Siraj, it is great virtually to be reunited with you. We have traveled the US through many cities and states together, to conventions, to banquets, to conferences, and so forth. Imam Siraj has been a major bridge builder. And when I say bridge builder, an intra-Muslim bridge builder, because part of the condition today is that the worlds of Islam have not always been united and needed someone like Imam Siraj to be the glue that holds those strands of Islam together in the US, and he's been a bridge builder between the Muslim community and the rest of the American society. And he's been absolutely, I've been honored to be with him on those platforms. I've even had the honor of speaking from his mimbar in Masjid Taqwah in New York. I want to say that this discussion today is almost exactly on the anniversary of the assassination of Medgar Evers. And here was a man murdered by the Klansmen, and he was not convicted of that murder. It's only in the next decade that the murderer was convicted on an attempted murder on another case and then went to jail. Today, 19 days have passed of consecutive nationwide protests at the killing of George Floyd. Here is a policeman identified. The pressure that has been put on is that the man is charged. Will he be convicted? I think that we are seeing this growth of this protest movement across the length and breadth of the world. It's across the United States, but it's across the world. And the question is, dare we hope that there has been a decisive shift in the response by Black people to the Black condition, not only in the United States, but across the world. And the Black condition is a condition that says when your skin is dark, you are endangered. You are disempowered. You are at the mercy of the powerful. And the US has been witness to many such instances and moments. In my time in the US, I have been there when Trayvon Martin was killed, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, and Eric Garner, the first one to utter the words, "I can't breathe." In all of these, there was outrage and anger, but they were sporadic and interspersed. They were never sustained. And often the missing ingredient in all of those cases that prevented sustained movement for transformation in the United States was that there was no sense of what the struggle was about. Was it part two of the civil rights movement, or was it, as in the South African case, a national liberation struggle? Was there too much of an abdication of protest in favor of electoral solutions to problems? And elections are important, but not on their own. Was there a conflation of activism in the recent times with social media liking and retweeting? Was that the extent of activism? Was the absence of a national movement that could cohere struggle the missing ingredient? Was there a dichotomy between protecting the gains of the civil rights movement against rocking the boat of unbridled anger? Did the gentlemen of the civil rights movement say, restrain yourselves, we've gained too much? And the question today is this reactive protest, or is there going to be a proactive articulation of the objectives? Is the objective to defund the police, to prosecute the perpetrators, or to make a transformation of the criminal justice system in the US, or to fundamentally shift the power base of the United States? Is the Black Lives Movement the answer to the organizational principle that may inspire and cohere a movement of protest towards these objectives? Are the linkages with global racism, US militarism, and racial capitalism being mainstreamed as debates in the US, or do they remain taboo projects? Must you continue to say to the people in uniform, thank you for your service? For us in South Africa and across Africa and the third world, do we import the US model against racism, or do we enrich what is happening in the US with our anti-racial, anti-racist experiences? That's a fundamental question. And while the US protests are most visible, it will have limitations if it does not see the links between racism today and the DNA of colonialism that was defined by a genocide of indigenous Americans, the enslavement of Africans brought there forcefully, and even the conquest of Hispanics in the southern lands. How has that DNA spawned the fault lines that characterize today the United States, the systemic racism and the militarism, both globally, to intervene with impunity where you want to, as well as the domestic militarism that has that anachronism called the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, that is part of the character of US society. And therefore, we need to understand that if we understand where this moment can be taking us to, the struggle will be limited in impact if it is not connected to all bigotries, the whole family of bigotries, Black Lives Matter remains the crucial crux around which this movement, because the most endangered today in the US are people who are black. And that's a peculiar notion in the USA, because in the rest of the world, particularly in South Africa, black is inclusive of all those victimized by colonialism, victimized by racism, victimized by other bigotries. The US has special circumstances, and maybe this process is the healing and the uniting process for them. And while we understand that, we must say, indeed, that those who have suffered dispossession, discrimination, colonialism, that we need to understand that unless we confront all bigotries, we don't effectively confront a bigotry directed against us. So it is against racism, it is against xenophobia, it is against Islamophobia, it is against misogyny. And therefore it's a struggle for justice. And part of the answer is in the White House. It is about the removal of Trump, the naked hard edge. But Obama has shown that it's not enough, because Obama has been limited by one man's ability to change an institutional system developed over 2 centuries. And Obama has also brought an unintended problem that people of whiteness say, how can the US be racist if we elected a black president? And so there's the false dawn of a post-racial society, and therefore don't speak about race. And so the removal of race from the discourse has been one of the important things that I think has inhibited a sustained movement for change. And the question finally that I ask is, are we at the tipping point? Have we seen a perfect storm, a moment of convergence, even rupture? Because here you have an Amy Cooper who understood perfectly how to victimize a black man and to activate the rawness of a white cop with a phone call. Here we have seen George Floyd, how a white cop acts with that impunity. And the question is, what is the last straw that broke the camel's back? And I think the perfect storm is all of that, plus the fact that COVID-19, the coronavirus, has acted with absolute devastation against 13% of the population being African American. 1/3 of the infections and 1/3 of American deaths have been African American. In some places, it's been 30% deaths and infections. In other places, 64% deaths of African Americans. It's compounded the inequality, the poverty, the joblessness, the incarceration rates, the comorbidities, and the immunodeficiencies that blacks have started off with in this race to normality. And therefore, the question is all of this forming the tipping point? And does America have the ability to make this a decisive moment? And do we in the rest of the world have the ability not only to be in solidarity with our brothers and sisters there, but to unshackle us from our own experiences of bigotries and racism and dispossession and all of those kind of things? This is a moment of convergence of solidarities, but it is not in sympathy with others. It is in concert to make this the decisive moment. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran to you, Ambassador Rasool. Shukran to you. Thank you very much for those opening comments of yours. The points that you raised was, is this going to be sustained? The outrage that's been expressed in anger. Is this a simple movement of protest at the moment? You mentioned the issue of racial capitalism, and that's quite important. And I think what I think is critical in terms of one of your comments, there's this DNA of colonialism that still resides within the fabric of the American society, particularly the white American society, that needs to be eradicated. And then you also talked about the genocide of the indigenous peoples, the Aborigines who were found there by supposedly Christopher Columbus first, before they were destroyed and annihilated as a community. Before I thank you very much once again, just a reminder that you are you can also watch this live on ITV in South Africa and Africa in many countries, and also listen to it live on VOC FM in Cape Town. Before I asked Imam Siraaj to come on board, just a few statistics that I think he could also refer to. There are 12.5 million Africans who were shipped eventually as slaves to the Americas in the 17th and 18th centuries. Of those, about 4.5 million were taken to the United States. Today, African Americans make up about 15% of the total US population, and they earn at least 30% less than the median income in the country. Police killings, believe it or not, are the leading cause of death among young men. I mean, that is a disgusting statistic. And of that, African American men are twice as likely to die at the hands of police in America. There are 6.5 million people, believe it or not, in US prisons, of which African American prisoners make up 35% of that population, despite them being 15% of the total US population. It shows us the kind of disparities and the kind of racial bias that we find in the United States. And interestingly, and perhaps the last point, there are 1 million policemen in the United States. It looks like it's a comfortable place for many of the people in the United States to act out almost the kind of Hollywood dreams about murdering people and using their guns at random against their own in the country. So the next person to speak, as I've already indicated, is Imam Siraaj. Imam Siraaj, the floor is yours. Bismillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasul, amma ba'd. I want to first thank you. I'm very honored to be here, especially with Ambassador Rasool, a brother whom I love and love to be with and love to listen to him. And I believe, I have to be honest with you, I have a lot to say. I need about 5 hours, but I don't think you have 5 hours. So I'm going to try my best to make a summary of what I want to talk about. I want to begin with an interesting statement that Thomas Jefferson made. Thomas Jefferson is as American as you can get, was the 3rd president of the United States of America. And listen to what he said. I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot remain asleep forever. What we have, once in a while, you see something that happens that is so profound that the only thing you can say it's an act of God. And maybe we'll talk about that to some degree. When you look at the COVID-19 and the impact of all over the world, when May 25th, when George Floyd was murdered, it's something that happened that had a profound effect. Someone once asked the question, what will America be? The answer is, what do you want it to be? And what are you willing to do to make it happen? If you look at me, you notice I have several identities. Ana Aswad, I'm Black. You know what? I love being Black. I can't wait to wake up every morning Black. You say, why? Because Allah mentioned Quran, Huwa alladhi yusawwirukum fil arhami kayfa yasha. It is Allah who created you in the womb as he pleased. If Allah is pleased to make me a Black man, I'm happy to be a Black man. Indeed, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, said, Inna Allah ta'ala la yanduru إلى أسامكم ولا إلى صوركم ولكن ينظروا إلى قلوبكم. God Almighty is not going to look at your forms or your bodies. He ain't concerned about your color, but he will look at two things: your heart and your deeds. When you look at the condition of Black people, so number one, Ana Aswad, I'm Black. Ana Afrikiyun, I'm African. If you ask the Black men and women of America, where they from? They say Africa. But where in Africa? We don't know. Ana Aswad, I'm Black. Ana Afrikiyun. Ana Amerikiyun. I'm American. This is my country. Ana Bashar, I'm a human being. All of that, these are my identities. But let's take a look at Black people for a moment. You know, nothing is more frustrating and brings more anger to a Black person when a Black person says Black lives matter. And you say all lives matter. But that's true. If all lives matter, Black people wouldn't have to say Black lives matter. Black lives matter. You know, I'm a researcher. I study, I read current events. But there's something about current events, and there's a difference between current events and history. Current events tell you what's going on now, but history tells you why. Let me give an example. I did some research on my country. I said, I'm American, right? So I'm American. And I wanted to see the life expectancy of an average American. And this is what I came up with. The life expectancy of an average American is 78.6 years. And if you look at the nations of the world, we'd be the 45th nation with the highest life expectancy. But that's misleading. If you ask the question, what is the average life expectancy of an African-American man, of a Black man? It is 71.5 years. If we took Black men as a nation, we would be 111th in the world. When you look at the disparity, you heard some of it today already, but there's more, there's millions of more. There's a lot of things we can talk about. But the question is, how do we get there and what are we going to do? Because I think, number one, the COVID-19 is divine, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Number two, the murder of George Floyd was divine. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? Martin Luther King Jr. said, he who gets behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster than the man up front. Black people are behind whatever yardstick you want to use to measure the prison, the health disparity in economics, prison. Did you know that every year 10,000 innocent people are convicted? 10,000 innocent people are convicted in the United States every year, many of them Black. Almost every week I read a newspaper. I read about a Black man who was in prison for 40 years and was exonerated. Found out that he was in jail 40 years, 50 years, 60 years for crime that they never committed. 85% of the cases that are adjudicated in the courts of America are won or lost in the very jury selection process. What happened with George Floyd? Why is it for 2 weeks people are protesting? Blacks and whites and all over the world, people are protesting. There seems to be a movement happening. What's going to happen? Allahu Alam. But the question is, what will America be? What do you want it to be? Let me give an example. There are a couple of models, but I'm going to give you one model that's interesting. You know, it's often that especially black men, are murdered. Sometimes black women too are murdered by white police officers. Seldom are they held accountable. But last year, something interesting happened. A woman by the name of Amber Geiger was convicted of killing a black man, and it should have been a slam dunk case, right? She murdered a black man in his apartment, and she claimed that she thought she was in her own apartment, and she thought he was an intruder. She was convicted. But let me give you something interesting to think about. This happened in Dallas, Texas. Consider this, the population of Dallas. 42% of the population in Dallas are Hispanic, 29% white, 24% black. The mayor of Dallas, black. The police chief of Dallas, black. The Dallas County District Attorney, black. The judge who presided over this case, black. Of the 12 jurors and 4 alternatives, 7 of them were black, 4 were white, and 5 other races. What am I saying? America is changing. America is not the same. By 2045, white people will be a minority in this country. Changing demographics. Yes, political activism is important, but there's something else happening with the death of George Floyd. It seems as if people were waking up. You know, we never blame people based on their color. We're not against white people. We're not. We're against, injustice. And let me tell you something. I'm gonna try to conclude. Last year, it was April 15th. I was watching a baseball game, and I happened to turn on the TV as a baseball game, and I saw something strange. Do you know in all sports, not only do they have the names on the uniforms, but in the back of the uniforms, they have their number. In every team, they have their own number. Every player has his own number to identify him. So I'm watching the game, and I noticed the New York Mets, every baseball player had the same number. Same number. And then I watched the other team, everyone had the same number. And do you know what number they had? They had the number 42. All of them wore the number 42. Why are they wearing the number 42? It was in honor of a black man named Jackie Robinson. Why 42? 42 was his number. Jackie Robinson was the first African American allowed to play baseball in 1947. They had been playing baseball for many, many years, 80-something years, I think it was. But finally, they allowed a black man to play Major League Baseball. And in honor of him, his number was retired, and no one could ever wear the number 42 again. But every year, in commemoration to him, and April 15th, all the teams, everybody wear the number 42. Yes, we had a black president, yes. But you gotta understand something. There's a white backlash from President Obama. Everyone wasn't pleased with that. And there are some politicians who take advantage of that, some people who still want the old way. In my conclusion, brothers and sisters, what we are witnessing now is the end of white supremacy. It's different. Let me say this to you. I love the arts. When I went to college, my major was math, but my minor was art. I was an artist. and I painted. This is before I became a Muslim. And, you know, oftentimes in a person's art, embedded in their art, is their philosophy of life. Spike Lee, an African-American film producer, he said, someone asked him the question, what makes a great movie? He said, a great movie have three things. Number one, it has to be entertaining. Number two, it has to be educational. And number three, it has to be inspirational. If there are two movies that I can recommend for you to watch, and Ambassador Rasool, you have to watch both these movies. Everyone else don't have to do it, but you have to do it. One of them is called 12 Angry Men. It came out in 1956. And it's about a movie of a Latino-American teenager charged with murder. And the whole movie took place in a jury room where they're deliberating room. And 12 men had to deliberate on the innocent or the guilt of this man. From the beginning, he's guilty. They feel he's guilty. We don't even have to discuss it. So there's no names in the movie. It was juror number one, number two, number three. So the whole movie takes place in that, and it shows how the jury system works. That's movie number one. Movie number two came out last year rather. It's called the Just Mercy. It's a true story about really prison system injustice against Black people. So I would recommend you see that. But let me say this last thing, and before I go, I'm going to mention 5 women. One of them, you know. I'm going to mention 5 women, and I'm going to tell you the significance of that, and then I'm going to finish. Toni Ann Singh from Jamaica. Last year, she was Miss World. You know Zosie Benny Tunzi, you know, from South Africa. Last year, she's Miss Universe. Nia Franklin, Miss America last year. Chelsea Crisp, Miss USA last year. Khalid Garris, Miss Teen USA last year. For the first time in the history of the world, all 5 of these women Black. It's different now. Things are changing. People are changing, but now we have to take advantage. The question is, what's going to happen in America? What's going to happen in South Africa? What's going to happen in UK? What's going to happen in Europe? What's going to happen in the world? Answer, what do you want to happen? And what are you prepared to do to bring it about? The death of George Floyd is divine. You know why? Because Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, said, Antum shuhada Allah fil ard. You are God's witnesses on earth. And because this was witnessed, everybody saw it. People are outraged. 1965, a turning point of the civil rights movement. 1965 in Alabama, Selma, Alabama. You know what happened? On a Sunday, March 7th, 1965, 600 Black people want to march from Selma, Alabama to the capital, Montgomery. And you know why they're marching? Because Black people, though they're supposed to have the right to vote, they have the right to vote, but they had an illiteracy test. Black men and Black women had to take a test before they have a right to vote. And Ambassador Rasool, can you hear me right now?
Yes, we can, Imam. If you can conclude on that point.
I am. I know you. I told you going to get rid of me. I know that.
Your 5 hours are up.
I got you. Ambassador Rasool, I'm going to ask you a question right now. One of the questions that Black people had to answer in 1965. I'll give you $1,000 right now if you can answer the question. And this is the question. How many bubbles in a bar of soap? I think you would laugh. Because you know why? You can't answer the question. No one can question of votes for Black people right now. So we have a lot of work to do. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you.
Amen.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
Wa
barakatuh.
alaikum salam. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khairan, Imam Siraaj, for that introduction. Just by way of summarizing, you quoted Thomas Jefferson, which is a brilliant quote, I think. And you asked, what will America be under the new regime that we now find? And that's a question I'd like to explore a little bit more. And then you, I think beautifully, you were talking about Ana Aswad, Ana Al-Afrikiya, and then you said Ana Amerikiya also, which is correct. I think that's the way to treat the current condition that we find ourselves in. Well, interestingly, you find that you say that the American, particularly African Americans, remain behind in almost everything that happens in America, and which is a statistic I mentioned earlier on.
Yes, of course.
In terms of the
Everything.
income disparities that you have. And shockingly, and this I didn't know, you said that 10,000 people are convicted in America, and they are
innocent people, 10,000 innocent people.
Innocent people. They are eventually found to have been innocent. And that's one of the points that I would like to explore. And then you talked about two movies that you're saying that are key to watch, and maybe I could repeat them. 12 Angry Men, it's an oldish movie, and the new one called Just Mercy. Can I ask Ambassador Rasool the following question? Ambassador, I think we've sketched the background quite nicely. More importantly, you know, it's wonderful doing the kind of historical view, and casting backwards is important to plan ahead. What are the plans ahead for the global community when we're talking tackling racism as an issue? Because racism is not uniquely or only ingrained in the American psyche. It's ingrained in the South African psyche. It's ingrained in the European psyche. It's our good friend, or maybe not friend, maybe it's the wrong term. Modi is doing what he's doing against Muslims in India. The Rohingya and the Kosh in the upper echelons of India too. What is it that we as a world community, and I'm asking you this because your organization is aptly known as the World for All. What, in your opinion, should be done going forward, lest the risk would be that we would have a wonderful campaign of opposition to what happened to George Floyd. And like George Floyd, many others have said that they can't breathe and have died as a result. Many others are alive but can't breathe. How do we tackle the issue of racism going forward henceforth? Ambassador Rasool.
Thank you very much, Shahabuddin. I want to say two things, that there are two kinds of legacies of colonialism. One is the settler colonial, where the settlers in some cases remained in power and dominant, like the United States, like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and so forth. I think South Africa has a version of it because our settlers had nowhere else to go, and therefore they're embedded in our society and have the economic and other accesses to power. But then there are places where the settlers have moved, but have often left behind a legacy, either embedded in certain elites or in certain frames of thought, and where they've moved from the racial us, they have moved to the micro ethnicities, the micro religious, and the micro divisions in those societies. And so those societies wait for a Modi to come along and, for example, to exploit it. In Burma, or you have the similar situation. And the key thing that I think particularly COVID-19 is bringing about is that it has disrupted the world with its fragmentations. Disease has shown that the world is one. You think you're safe in one country, but it can reach you. And in the same way, the combination of this moment of pandemic and crisis has in fact allowed us to be able to make connections through technology. And what we need to vow to each other is that as COVID-19 recedes, our solidarity will not, our connectedness will not. We will not allow ourselves to be fragmented according to our favorite ism or phobia. that Muslims must never stand in a corner and make Palestine their own, make the Rohingya their own, make the Modi issues their own. In the same way that we shouldn't allow blacks in America to feel on their own. And we've got to have those micro-unities between Indian Arab American Muslims and African American Muslims so that they are never again separated. And we've got to do that globally. I think this moment is ripe with the possibility of overcoming fragmentation and building not only global solidarity, but I think a global movement against those kind of power structures that have been so unraveled by COVID-19.
Ambassador Rasool, thank you for that. What is it that must be done going forward? What are the campaigns that must be launched and or issues that needs to be tackled going forward? Because the concern always is that it's typically, you know, we all get very upset and angry about issues. 2-3 weeks down the line, nothing continues to happen. What is it that we as a global community, if not South African community for that matter, because we're known to be steadfast campaigners against injustices, what is it that globally should be happening now in your view?
I think we've got to fill that space with leadership, that vacuum that has been occasioned. I think the populist leaders have been exposed, and I think that there is a realization that we need a new thinking. I think we've got to get rid of the old thinking. There are those who think that this capitalism can be deracialized and reformed, and we must just get back to that. I think on the other hand, there are those who believe now is the time to revive our socialist ideals. Let's go back to that. I think the debate is somewhere in the new. What is the maqasid? What are the intents, the values, and the objectives that will revive humanity? So is egalitarianism important? Let's not put egalitarianism in a labeled bottle necessarily called socialism. Is the market a useful mechanism? But let's unbottle it from its capitalist label. And let's see what works for us. What is this humanity that I think we need to revive? How do we see each other as humans without unduly deracializing or thinking we're in a post-racial situation? Let's deal with race and those identities as crucial matters as we go forward. And therefore, I think it's not about only thinking of the Socialist International. Now is the time for us to come forward. It's the time for us to come forward on a new set of precepts that is defined by the values we want to surge with, the objectives we want to surge with, and the intents. And that, I think, has to be the basis of a new thinking as the precondition for a new movement across the world.
Thank you very much. That's Ambassador Rasool giving us his view. Imam Siraaj, there's a good chance that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, might bring out the military to squash what is happening in the United States as we speak now. Is there a big fear that this could actually happen? And what do you see the kind of reaction on the ground that you expect might be visible?
Let me tell you what John F. Kennedy said. He said, those who will make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. I've never been about a person threatening we're going to do this, but right now we have the momentum. And you see, the president is being exposed. He's being exposed by his own people, his own base. He's being exposed as someone who don't care about anyone but himself. So what we have to do, someone once said that the constant dripping of water on a stone will drill a hole in the stone. This is the moment. Allah has given us this moment. And I want to say this, I want to get this in because I don't want to leave without saying this. There's a brother in my community. He told me, he said, Imam, I take 29 different medicines a day. I take 29 different medicines a day. He's got 29 different ailments and he takes medication. And the medicine that he takes doesn't cure it doesn't cure him. A man came to the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, and said his brother had a stomach ache. And the Prophet said, Isqi asalan, give him honey. The bottom line that he gave him the honey, because Allah said the honey is a shifa, it's a cure for what's in the in the person. So, but this thing, people, what they do, they waste their time treating symptoms and not the root of the problem. And I'll give you one example. And listen, I can't help myself. I'm a preacher. I talk. You give me a mic, I won't stop. You got to stop me. So let me say this. I think it's critical so that we can get the point. Racism isn't the only problem. You see, when a person has a headache, and we all have had headaches, and a person takes an aspirin is a lie, because the aspirin doesn't deal with the root of the problem. What an aspirin does, it goes to where the pain is and it deadens the nerve. So you can't feel the pain, but you didn't solve the problem. So we have to make sure that we go to the root of the problem rather than going to all these fires, because today is racism. Like in my country right now, I don't know about South Africa, drugs is a major problem. 70,000 people a year die of drug overdose. 480,000 Americans die every year as a result of smoking cigarettes. 41,000 Americans die every year from secondhand smoke. They don't even smoke cigarettes. The World Health Organization said by the end of the 21st century, if the nations of the world do nothing, 1 billion people will die as a result of smoking cigarettes. What am I saying? You got to go to the root. Listen, I'm a Muslim, and I'm going to always go back to what Allah and His Messenger have said, because the answer has always been in God sending the prophets to take the people from the darkness and bring them to the light, to deal with the root of the problems. And the root of the problem, the issue is man making a decision of what he's going to do. There's no absolute right, absolute wrong. And this is why Sir Isaac Newton said that I can calculate the movement of the stars, but not of the madness of man. So today, one person think he's better because he's white. Another day, another person think he's better because he's Arab. And another day, another person think he's better because he's this and better and then that. But for us, we got to go to the root. And my root always is go back to God, go back to Allah, go back to the beginning. And that's going to be the point of where we're going to begin to solve all of these issues.
Imam, Jazakallah to you. Am I muted? Jazakallah to you. Imam, you've referenced we as an African American community in the United States. This is not the first, and I'm sure this is not going to be last George Floyd incident. Given the DNA, as Ambassador Rasool spoke about earlier on, is there a chance that this thing would die down quite soon? And
it will die. It will die down. It will die down if we let it. And this is why I go back to my theme.
That was my question, Imam. That was my question. Is there a weakness in the kind of systems that exist within the African American communities that prevents them from coalescing and therefore tackling the issues that you've highlighted?
I don't think so.
What would those issues be?
No, I don't. I'm not agreeing with that premise. I'm saying that timing is everything. Timing is everything. Okay. This is the right time. Every leader, every African American leader that I speak to, even non-African Americans, non-Black, says that this is different. This is different. We have never seen such sustained activity. In 1965, when I mentioned the March to Selma, Alabama, do you know what Black people got in August? Right? That was March. March, April, May, June, July, August. President Lyndon Johnson signed a voters' right bill. Something happened. Something will happen. Something is happening right now. Right now, our Congress is meeting. They're changing laws. They're changing laws from state to state and city to city. So this seems a little bit different. You know what? We always have to have hope, but hope with a plan. So I'm saying that something is happening. I've never seen it like this before. I've marched 1,000 miles, but this one seems a little bit different.
Thank you.
And again, and impact all over the world. Thing is, can we take advantage of it and take it to the next level? That's the issue.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Imam Siraaj. Ambassador Rasool, you spent 5 quality years in the United States as the ambassador to the United States from South Africa. Your gut feel about the issues that face not the black African Americans, but the white Americans. Is there a notion amongst them that the kind of injustices that are being visited upon the African American people, that there needs to be something different that happens amongst the white Americans, and which is not happening? And why do you think that is the case?
Shabuddin, I spent 4.5 years as ambassador and then about 2 years as a scholar at Georgetown University. My exit public interview that was conducted by Mehdi Hassan, he asked, Trump had just been elected, wasn't president yet. He said, what do you think of the election of Trump? My response was that America was asleep and Trump is the alarm clock. I thought that that was not going to be the case until 2020, that perfect storm. And I think that what is encouraging is that there's a diversity of people. For the first time, I am seeing Arab Indian imams stepping forward. Just about 2 years ago, a prominent imams from those communities would make unwitting racist utterances. Now I think that they are subjecting them to the perspective of Black Lives Matter because they know who is the endangered community in the United States. Secondly, I am amazed that a church that was damaged in the protests, where Trump posed with a Bible, that the church leadership across the United States came out and didn't cry because their church was damaged. They felt that the desecration of their church by Trump's posture was more important than the windows that were broken of the church. That's encouraging for me. The number of young white activists joining these marches is encouraging to me, not on their own terms, but on the terms of Black Lives Matter. Okay. And that is different. And the fact that I started off by saying this was the 19th consecutive day of nationwide protest, it is for me absolutely sustained as it goes forward. And so I think that there is something different. The question is there enough leadership to harness it? Is there enough energy to sustain it? Is it going to translate into legal reforms, as Imam Siraaj says? Is it going to translate into electoral shifts in November? Hopefully it does. But then Joe Biden also needs to get out of the way. He must understand that in a national referendum in the USA, he is the yes vote and Trump is the no vote. It's not that he is liked. He is simply a proxy for a rejection of the hard, naked edge of supremacy in the US. And therefore, I think we must have an all of the above response to what is happening. It is protest, it is election, it is legal reform, it is this, that, and the other. But most importantly, it is a global movement that I think must take center stage, that supports the US, but that also supports what's happening in India, that must have an intolerance towards what Israel is doing in Palestine, what is happening in Rohingya, what is happening in Kashmir. This is the moment. If we don't glue it together into one mighty river at this point, we may lose this ability to make a tremendous thrust against the whole legacy of colonialism, that is racism, dispossession, discrimination, and disempowerment.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ambassador Rasool. Can I just say now, thank you very much to viewers on ITV. They only have 1 hour allocated towards this program. We thank the viewers from ITV for having been visiting our lounges for live, in fact. Thank you very much, Ambassador Rasool. We'll continue for next few minutes on Voice of the Cape, and also obviously on all the other social media platforms. Imam, I just want to put you on the spot. You're the future President of the United States of America. Tell me what reforms you would consider as an African American that is an egalitarian policy that you would institute today if you were asked.
Can I be honest with you? I want to, before I answer that question, you know, you may think I'm crazy, but the best thing that's happening to this movement right now is President Donald Trump. He has been so exposed by so many people that we now see very clearly, people see very clearly who never saw before, the military really is against Donald Trump. Many Republicans, you'll see shortly, are going to abandon the ship of Donald Trump. My thing is this, you know what? Listen, this nation, the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said, "An-nasu kulluhum banu Adam wa Adam min turab." All of the people, all human beings, are the children of Adam, and Adam was created of dust. There's no superiority of a black over white or white over a black. No. And we must give everyone freedom of their religion. Our religion teaches that. So what I would try to implement justice. I would implement what the Harvard Law School, in the entrance of the faculty library, is a verse from the Quran. It says, "Oh, you who believe, stand out firmly as witnesses for Allah, even against yourself, or against your parents, or against your relatives, or against the rich or the poor. Stand up for justice." My platform would be a platform of justice. I know that's simple, but it's very simple. But Allah loves the just and He doesn't love the unjust.
Ambassador Rasool, can I just tap on your thinking? Your time in the United States would have exposed you to the prison system in the United States. The United States has a plethora of private prisons that's 100% profit driven. Is there a notion that the fact that African Americans are arrested and incarcerated in the numbers that they are they filling a quota here to try and make sure that the investors in the prison system actually make some good money out of incarcerating as many African Americans as possible, do you think?
I'd also like to hear Imam Siraaj's view on this, but the fact of the matter is that when you're being paid per head for someone incarcerated in a private prison, and when so much of the budget goes to private prisons, there is a perverse incentive to fill the prisons. There is nothing correctional about a prison system if it is profit driven. And therefore, no country should allow something like that to be privatized at all, because when the burden is on the state's intention is to spend less. Whereas when it's in private hands, the intention is to spend more per head. And it's not that they target African Americans, it's that African Americans are the easiest targets. Okay. The conviction rates are much higher with African Americans because the burden of proof in court doesn't really have to hold up, because you just need a skewed jury in order to get the conviction rate. You don't even have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. You simply have to prove something, motive or whatever the case may be. And that is why you've got this phenomenon of now with DNA, people being reprieved.
Exonerated.
Because now it has been proven that people were simply lynched in a legal system as opposed to from a tree. And so I think African Americans have proven to be the ones who are the least well represented legally. Secondly, they are guilty until proven innocent, unlike the norm. And thirdly, there is very little systems of protest against the incarceration of African Americans, and that feeds a profit motive. Someone saw a gap in the market, took it, filled it, and I think that when an unscrupulous president comes along who's part of the profit-making buddy system, you can see a proliferation of all of those kind of things.
Right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Rasool. Imam Siraj, we rapidly getting towards the end of the program for this evening. Your closing comments, what would you say would be the powerful issues that needs to be tackled immediately? You did mention earlier on that justice is a big issue. Is there an opportunity to form lobby groups that would be so strong and unshakable going forward that hopefully, inshallah, will cause not only America to change in its attitude towards those who are non-European across the globe, but also to those who are currently oppressed in every corner of the world?
I think what's happening now is that I'm very hopeful, by the way, and by nature, I'm a hopeful person, but hope for a reason, right? Because we are forming alliances, and one of the things I try not to do, I try not to always telegraph what we're doing. I try not to telegraph what we're doing, but I say right now, there's some unbelievable alliances taking place right now. This feels different. I haven't spoken to one leader. I'm talking about Muslim, non-Muslim leader, black, non-black, who are not feeling that this is different. Everybody feels that this is different. The question, only Allah knows, right? But, listen, Noah preached for 950 years and maybe had 80 followers, but you still have to keep on going. So Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, 23 years, now 1,800,000,000 people follow him. So the consistency, the persistency, that's my issue. Talking to one another, we're talking to others we haven't spoken to ever before, but we're speaking now and we're planning together. We got a lot of issues. Inshallah, we'll work it.
Inshallah.
We'll work it together. Inshallah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Ambassador Rasool.
Just
closing comments?
I think that Muslims are often very resistant to partnerships. They often think that every partnership they go in is an unshakable marriage. Whereas South Africa, and this has been one of the things that I've been speaking about, Imam Siraaj will know, across the length and breadth of America, saying that when you share issues, you form partnerships. When you share objectives, you form coalitions. And where you share values, you form alliances. Muslims have the tendency to think, oh no, here's the LGBT community, I can't. Maybe you can't be in alliance with them, but you can be in coalition with them. Muslims think, here are evangelical Christians, they are recruiting us in West Africa, etc., etc. We can't be, but if you share an issue with them, you form a partnership. And so the art and the craftsmanship of politics at this moment is going to let us down. And therefore, I would say, if Muslims of Indian Arab origin have found it difficult, for example, to even reach out to African American Muslims because they have certain ideas about Elijah Muhammad, etc., etc., this is the time to drop that. You've got to have intra-Muslim alliances in order to make inter-community coalitions work at this moment. That's the most important one. And I want to end by saying that COVID-19 must not be ignored in this. It is a killer. Even in Cape Town, in South Africa, we must make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give shifa to those who are infected, prevent their deaths, inshallah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us safe, and that more importantly, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep the protesters who are out there under difficult conditions to maintain social distance, but fighting for social justice. Allah put a special protection around each one of them, because if they lose momentum, because they fear for their own infection rates, the world loses momentum towards justice. And so, inshallah, that is my closing plea and prayer, that inshallah this will happen.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That was Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool in his closing remarks. I must thank both the participants, Imam Siraaj, Wahhaj, for taking the time. It is a Saturday afternoon, I believe, in the United States, and for spending time
There's
with
no
us.
baseball today.
So yeah, it's baseball day. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you can wield your bat against a few
Allah.
people, Imam.
Alhamdulillah.
But thank you very much. And we, inshallah, maybe at some point when all of the COVID issues are over, maybe we should invite you to on a speaking tour of South Africa, inshallah.
Yes, we'd
Jazakallah
love to.
khairan to you.
Thank you.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khairan. And then Ambassador Rasool, as eloquent as always, thank you very much. It was good having you on the program. I think your deep insight into what happens in America, given your position as the ambassador to the United States from South Africa, clearly stands in good stead in terms of your views that you've expressed this evening. Then I'd be feeling my duty if I didn't thank the ITV for having joined us live on this program, and also Voice of the Cape FM in Cape Town for having broadcast this event live. Then a big thank you also to the technical team here in the studio who've done a fantastic job, and I'd like to mention in particular Wesley, Anwar Abdurrahman, and also Muhammad Jaffer, who is the master behind this. And I cannot forget, obviously, Dr. Ilyas Parker, the driver behind what happens at the Academia Library, and his team of madcaps who drive the library to the extent that it has. And I think it's been a wonderful experience. Shanaz Ebrahim, who does all the tricks and trades in the background, thank you very much to you too. Thank you to all the viewers and all the listeners. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah.